Greetings, folks. It appears that it is 6:30, so I'd like to call to order the 5th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and I will lead folks in the pledge as well. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So our first agenda item will be to act on the minutes of October 7th. Any errors or omissions on those? Seeing none, accept those under general consent. That brings us to communications. Kim.
Yes, thank you. I would like to report the following resignations. Emily Foster, Turner Primary School Special Education Ed Tech 3 in the ASP program, effective November 9th. Lynn Oakes, Turner Elementary School 6th grade teacher, effective November 12th. Terry Clare, Lead Central School Food Service Assistant, was effective on October 22nd. And Roselle Ward, Adult Education Director, effective date to be determined. And Kathy Goforth, Lead Central School Pre-K Ed Tech 2, effective December 31st. The board also received a thank you note for the district's donation in memory of Andrea Hammond's father.
Thank you. Adjustments to the agenda?
There are none.
Thank you. That brings us to committee reports, and I have to admit, as I'm looking at my notes here, I neglected to welcome our student representative, who will have an opportunity to speak here as we get into committee reports, Tristan Ridley. Welcome, Tristan. You even have your own agenda item, and that's 5.4, but first we'll hear from Yuri and the Finance Committee.
We did meet tonight. We spoke about the reviewed warrants, signed off on some warrants. We reviewed the August and September financials. Everything looks to be on track as you would expect 2 months into the school year. If you were to look at those, you'll see we're up a little bit from last year. Obviously, the reason for that is we're in school full-time this year versus last year at this time. There's an agenda item tonight about a lease purchase for a new school bus and lawnmower. The reason that this is coming through the board is because of the dollar threshold is a little bit more than a normal bus because it's bigger. We also received an update that the well at Turner Primary School that we discussed last time is in progress, and Dean and his team are working with the state to get all the necessary paperwork done so we can get that well scheduled to be built.
Thank you. That brings us to Plant Transportation Building. Jessica.
We have not met.
Not met. Curriculum Policy. Joanne.
We did meet. I don't know if I should have a microphone or not. We discussed video surveillance, and there's a new policy. The whole thing is new, rather than using the old one. We also did, that one's not coming to the board tonight, recruiting and hiring of administrative staff. We discussed, and you have a policy. Public's right to know, freedom of access is on tonight. 3 job descriptions: transportation specialist, transportation supervisor, facility supervisor are on. And then we had a couple of guests, one interested in the job description and one interested in a policy that we were discussing, and it was a policy about admission of exchange students. And we had decided not to bring that to the board, but there are some questions about it. We're just going to leave it like it is, and I'll turn it over to Teresa, I guess, for that one.
So like Joanne said, we did have a lengthy discussion. As you remember, at a previous board meeting, there was a request to allow a 4th exchange student to come to Levitt, and that was granted. Those of us on the committee discussed it, and Mr. Shaw has some comments that he will probably add. I believe that the intent of the committee was they felt that it could stay as it is, and if additional people felt that there was a need to come and change it, that would be done. Mr. Shaw, do you want to add anything in terms of numbers of area schools and?
I guess the only thing I would add is that I checked around with my colleagues around the county and see what they did with exchange students, and it varies, not surprisingly, from school to school. And we are kind of right in the middle in regard to the number of students that we admit at 3. And I'm fine with keeping it 3. If the board chooses to change it, they certainly can do that, and I'll work with that. I wouldn't recommend that we go any higher than 4, but I'm very comfortable with 3. And I'm also very comfortable with the policy as it reads. It provides a good deal of structure for the process, which would be lacking if we didn't have it.
So just to clarify, at this time, the subcommittee is not recommending a change to the policy. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, we didn't recommend.
Okay. Thank you. And that brings us to item 5.4, student representatives. Welcome, Tristan. And I think if folks need a microphone, we can figure out a way to get one over there. I think I should be able to.
We don't seem to have one down here.
I can share.
Not
gracefully. I can't share this gracefully. So we can see who's not the technical expert here.
Nothing new to report.
Short and sweet. Thanks, Tristan. And certainly don't be shy as we go along in weighing in on things. So we're glad that you're here this evening. That brings us to administrator report, and that would be Teresa.
I'm going to share this report time with some of my colleagues, but don't worry, I'm reporting as well.
Good evening. This is Ryan Patriot reporting from Turner Primary School, and I did want to start my report just telling you an interesting story. We started pool testing this week at Turner Primary School, and it went very well. And we were over in the pre-K wing, and the nurse asked the friends if they were ready to have their pool tested done. And one of the 4-year-olds said, "I love pool parties." And then another one said, "I didn't bring my bathing suit. Oh no." So I wanted to start sharing that story with you. Thank you for taking the time to learn about how our elementary programs determine how students are performing, and then what we do to address those needs. We have a collective assessment calendar that identifies when we administer assessments to students in the major content areas of reading, writing, and math. Some of those assessments are formative, and formative are the day-to-day assessments that teachers give to identify student skills and to show their day-to-day progress. And then some of those assessments are summative, meaning they happen after the course of a unit of study. So if I teach math and I teach Unit 2 on decimals, at the end of the unit I'm going to give a unit assessment to help me identify what students need moving forward. So those major assessments, of course, you've heard us talk about them before. They are the NWEA's running records of outcomes. So teachers also use observational and attendance data to determine what skills students need as well. You can learn a lot from students just watching them in the classroom, watching them, answer questions, hearing them raise their hand and give answers. Those are all great pieces of data, as well as the assessments that I'm going to talk about next. So a running record is an opportunity to listen to a child read, and then you talk to them about what they're reading. So typically they read out loud for an excerpt or a period of time at the younger grades, and you're making note of the strategies that they're using with the text. And then after, you talk to the student about what they've read and what they remember about what they've read. And that's what a running record is, and those happen pretty much every day in small groups with the teacher. And so that data is collected to help identify what students need next. Of course, the NWEA is a computerized adaptive assessment that invites students to answer questions about reading and math. And as the student takes the assessment, the questions are designed from different strands of the subject area. So for example, when a student takes a math assessment, there are some geometry questions, there are some computation, numbers and operations questions, there are some algebra questions, and then problem solving is kind of interwoven throughout the whole assessment. So at the end of the assessment, the student gets a score, and then the teacher can go in and drill down a little bit deeper to see which areas the student needs some more progress in, and then that helps them drive their instruction moving forward. All of that data is placed on data walls, and they're coded and reviewed, and then teachers use that data to inform their next steps. So we have electronic data walls, and then when you put in scores, the box changes color depending on what kinds of needs the student has, and then you can sort the students by the needs that they have when you're thinking about small group instruction in your classroom. Teachers meet weekly in their professional learning communities to analyze the data and determine next steps in regards to instruction. So, for example, at Turner Primary School, every grade level meets for 40 minutes a week, and we use the data wall to drive those conversations. And we talk about either units we're about to teach or units that we just finished teaching and how our students performed on those. So once again, all of that data helps determine the types of small groups or individual groups and what they might look and sound like for each student in the classroom. So, and then of course the data determines what kinds of intervention systems the student might need to support catching them up or accelerating their learning. This year, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we have decided to move forward with eSpark at the elementary level, which is a system where the student takes the NWEA and then you can upload their scores, and then it builds an individual learning plan for each individual student. Or you can give the child a placement test at the beginning of eSpark, and it will identify what skills they need, and then the students can use eSpark on their tablet to practice those skills. At Turner Elementary, I know they use Zern, which is another intervention system as well, where scores are inputted into a system and then an individual learning plan is provided for the student. And then of course we have parent-teacher conferences in November, and so the data that we collect, we communicate that with families about how their children are performing and about what next steps their child might need moving forward. And that's a little bit about how we identify what students need and then how we address what those needs are. Does anyone have any questions on the elementary assessment system?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Genevieve, principal at Tripp Middle School. I wanted to start and just share a little bit of data with you related to the pandemic and where the middle school is right now, most specifically quarantine data. So unfortunately, 64 students at the middle school have been fully quarantined due to a sports exposure. We have 2 students fully quarantined from a bus exposure. 63 students that were considered close contacts from a school exposure. Because of the masking policy, they've only had to symptom monitor. And so I know the mask debate is controversial, but I do think it's important to say that we would have 158 students who would have had to quarantine due to a close contact at school, which is 56% of the middle school population. We do have students that are having to quarantine, like I said. We're working really hard to get all of the assignments posted into Google Classroom. We're fortunate enough to have our tech integrator send a tutorial around to parents a little bit later than we had hoped, but helping them to navigate when students are working remotely. We also have a couple ed techs who have been running office hours for students to live Zoom into, and that has been helping. Aside from COVID and quarantining, we do have a lot of great things happening at the middle school that I wanted to share out. Our students are finally settling into a solid teaching and learning environment. We have completed the fall NWEA. Similar to the elementary that's using eSpark, the middle school is using MyPath, which is being met with mixed reviews because they're middle school students, and they don't want to do anything more than they have to. But it is successfully addressing learning gaps that they had in previous years. 5 of our sports seasons successfully wrapped up. If you were to visit the middle school, our hallways are currently festively decorated for the upcoming Halloween. We have a costume contest tomorrow. Our nutrition staff continues to provide record numbers of hot breakfast and lunch options, along with a very successful take-home meal plan, which is much appreciated by both athletes and students with food insecurities. And most importantly, we're building solid and lasting relationships with a lot of our students. After 2 months, I can confidently say that TMS has an amazing group of students, educators, and staff. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you.
And I was going to follow up, we've gone from primary to middle and up at the high school to talk about supporting students in their learning as we get started in the school year. We're almost as in tomorrow to the end of first quarter, so time is flying while we're having fun at it. As is typically the case, classroom teachers are regularly assessing where students are in their learning and adjusting instruction appropriately. We also have some assessments that we use. The NWEA is the biggest one, and this year it's impacting 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. We're working through the 11th graders right now. And those scores will be entered, and we'll be looking at those in addition to classroom data. Discussions around curriculum and pacing take place in content area groups with the classroom teachers during their PLC time. Most of our content area groups have PLC time that's scheduled into their rotating schedule, so they're able to meet during the day. If students are struggling, classroom teachers are supporting them in class with extra help and instructional practices, but at the same time, they're also supporting them during study halls when they're available and during their prep periods. Mr. Davis and I have been in conversations about trying to organize some students to help with tutoring as well during the school day. That schedule is a little bit more complicated to pull together than we thought it was going to be, so we're continuing to work on it. But hopefully we'll have that in place to support students during the school day. In addition to those supports that happen during school, we also have supports after school. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, we have content support for students after school. We have spaces for students to work if they just need a space to get work done every day after school, but there is support from a classroom teacher in the specific content areas on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Things are, as I said, wrapping up to the end of the first quarter and getting ready to move in to quarter number 2. Jana pointed out that their sports seasons are wrapping up, as are ours, and field hockey played tonight over in Freiburg and won 3-2, so they play again on Saturday. We're not sure where yet, but they will be playing again on Saturday. So if there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, but that's what's going on here at the high school.
Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm going to speak to you about student behavior. I know there have been some questions around student behavior in our district and in our schools. So I wanted to talk to you about student behavior, and then I also want to add the continuum of responses that each school has established. I'd like to begin by reviewing the Student Code of Conduct. This is so very important that it's actually encapsulated in a policy, JIC, which is called Student Code of Conduct. Ethical and responsible student behavior is an essential part of the educational mission of our schools. To that end, the board approved a system-wide code of conduct in 2014. I know that because it's the date on the policy, but I also served as part of that committee. It was created with input from school staff, students, parents, guardians, and the community. And this code defines expectations for student behavior as well as providing a framework for safe, orderly, and respectful learning environments. The Code of Conduct is intended to support and encourage students to meet the following standards for ethical and responsible behavior: respect, honesty, courage, compassion, and responsibility. Within our schools, students are taught expectations for safe, respectful, and responsible behaviors. Students are acknowledged when they meet these expectations, and they're provided additional supports and/or consequences when these behavioral expectations are not met. Expectations for behavior are shared with families in the school and district handbooks. Recognition of positive student behaviors happen in different ways across our 6 schools. This might be through Student of the Month, Student of the Quarter, verbal praise, class or school challenges, and acknowledgement systems. Consequences for negative student behaviors are established on a continuum and may be based on age, level, as well as motivation, meaning motivation of behavior. Why did the student act that way? Negative behaviors may be reported by school staff or students or parents and will be investigated at the school level. District policies are in place for issues such as bullying. Policy JICK provides a definition of bullying, and the accompanying administrative procedure explain for school administrators the guidance that they need to follow through. Bullying reports may be made by students, parents, guardians, and/or school employees. Complaints may be made orally or in writing, but all the reports are documented using a reporting form. Reports are investigated and claims substantiated with follow-up consequences as deemed appropriate. Even if a behavior does not meet the specific definition of bullying, because the definition is very specific, it still may warrant a consequence. What I hope to leave you with is this takeaway. As a school community, our 6 schools work to create positive learning environments for all of our students. Our student code of conduct, while the students may not know that it's called that, provides a foundation upon which each school builds their expectations for student behaviors. There may be times when students do not exhibit these behaviors, and this may be for a variety of reasons. Lack of skills, frustration, boredom, those are just a few. When this happens, protocols and policies are in place that guide school staff to respond to these negative behaviors. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Any questions for Teresa? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to the Superintendent's Report. Kim.
Thank you. So the great news is that we are approaching the end of October and we continue to provide in-person instruction for all students. This we know is the most important thing we can do for our children in terms of learning where they are academically, putting those supports in place for social, emotional well-being, as well as for mental health. We know that works best for them. I commend our teachers, our nurses, our full staff, our administrators, for all the work that they are doing and continue to do to support our students fully and to keep them in school as much as absolutely possible. As I think Gianna may have said, this week was our first week of pool testing, and it actually went very, very well. It was a tremendous amount of work to get it up and started, and it will continue to be a lot of work to make it happen. However, it is a way to keep more students in school more often. So it is worth every single minute we're investing in that. As I said, it went very well this week. All of the pools this week in the high school, at Turner Primary School, and in Turner Elementary School were negative, which is great news. In Tripp Middle School, in Leeds Central School, and at Green Central School, each of them had one out of all the pools, had one positive out of all those. So there was the required follow-up testing for that. Students who are participating in pool testing do not need to quarantine from school and school-based activities, which as long as it was a school exposure, which means fewer students quarantining, which is wonderful. Right now, currently, we have one positive case. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. conditions related to the school and pandemic. So every board meeting I present some data related to that and where we are. And of course, all of us continue to hope that conditions improve. At this point, as of yesterday, there were 620 new cases, which brought the 7-day average of new cases to 459. The state continues to measure levels of community transmission of COVID-19, and there are 4 categories: low, moderate, substantial, and high. Androscoggin County continues to have high community transmission. Between 55 and 59% of our students are vaccinated, those ages 12 to 18, and that is up from 50 to 54% at our last board meeting. Vaccination rates for all eligible people for all ages who have had at least 1 shot: green, 81%, up from 76% at our last board meeting. Turner, 82%, up from 76%. And Leeds, 71%, up from 67%. The Department of Health and Human Services is reporting staff vaccination rates in each school. DHHS will be reporting this data each month. So we now have 2 months of data about staff vaccination rates. The state average percentage for school staff fully vaccinated is, for this most recent month, 79.7%, which is up from 75.59%. Tripp Middle School vaccination rate is at 86.8%, up from 81.5%. Turner Elementary School is at 80%, up from 78.7%. Leavitt Area High School is 72.73%, up from 69.8%. Turner Primary School is 82%, up from 69.4%. Leeds Central School is 65%, up from 60%. And Green Central School remains the same at about 57%. DHHS is also reporting vaccination rates for central operations staff. That means people who work in the central office, bus drivers, van drivers, substitutes, and coaches. The state average of central operations staff who are fully vaccinated is 70.7%, up from 68.8%. MSAD 52 central operations staff vaccination rate is 32.5%, stayed the same. Currently, we have a positive case in Green Central School, a positive case in Leeds Central School, 5 in Turner Primary School, 4 in Turner Elementary School, 4 at the middle school, and 9 at the high school. The first week in October, the Maine Centers for Disease Control and Prevention designated Green Central School as being in outbreak status, which basically means that there are 3 or more confirmed cases of COVID-19 within a 14-day period. They're epidemiologically linked. The Maine CDC also determined, as they continue to do, that the positive cases were from exposure outside of school, meaning no in-school transmission, which is good news. This week, the CDC determined that Turner Elementary School is in outbreak status as well. Parent-teacher-student conferences are coming right up on November 18th. Last year, we had a lot of very positive feedback because we offered a Zoom option for the parent conferences. What parents said was that it saved travel time, and it meant that when they might otherwise not have been able to attend conferences, they were able to jump on the Zoom from work, and that was very helpful. So there will be more information coming out about conferences and signups at the schools. There will again be a Zoom option for parent-teacher conferences. I bet you have some more data, but I'm going to wait and share that when we get to agenda item 7.1, which is discussion of health and safety measures.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo Kim's thanks to all the folks at all levels in the district that have worked tremendously hard. At this point, it's hard to believe that it's almost the 1st of November, and I think folks have certainly risen to the challenges that we anticipated and risen to those that we didn't even know were things at the beginning of the year. So thank you to everybody who's worked so very hard to make that happen and to get us to this point. This brings us to public comment. I will do as I have for the last couple of meetings and refresh everybody on what our public participation policy is. There are printed copies out by the door when you came in, so certainly you may follow along on that sheet and have a copy for yourself as well. This is policy BEDH. MSAD 52 Board of Directors meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the official business of the school system. All regular, special, and emergency meetings of the board are open to the public. The public is cordially invited to attend and to participate in board meetings as provided in this policy. This policy applies only to meetings of the full board, not to meetings of board subcommittees. Although board meetings are not public forums, the board will provide appropriate opportunities for members of the public to express opinions and concerns related to the matters concerning education and MSAD 52 schools. The intent is to allow a fair and adequate opportunity for the public to be heard, while ensuring that the time allowed for public discussion does not interfere with fulfillment of the scheduled agenda. The board will designate a portion of its agenda as an opportunity for public participation. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. Members of the public may address the board within the guidelines provided in this policy. The chair shall be responsible for maintaining proper order and compliance with these guidelines. The following guidelines shall apply to public participation at board meetings. Item A. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. B. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic, as well as the time each individual may speak. And as we've done at recent meetings, that will be 5 minutes per speaker. Item C. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. And we'll do, for a matter of practice, we'll do that just as we have, utilizing the podium, and as folks indicate, I think there's a sheet, a sign-in sheet at the podium as well. D. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. E. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. F. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members or the superintendent only with the approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. G. Members of the board and superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. H. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. I. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. J. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. K. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. So that gives us ground rules. And if folks are interested in speaking, you may approach the podium and let us know who you are.
My name is nausea, suffocation, and inability to concentrate while wearing a mask. I don't take any classes in the school system, but I do take the standardized tests every spring and fall. And during the most recent spring tests, the last tests I took before I got mask exemption, I have experienced some of these adverse effects from the mask. My brother Oscar takes classes at the high school, and he actually blacked out because of the mask. Luckily, he took it off before he actually fell over, but just imagine what could happen, especially in shop class, which he was taking, if you fell over using a power tool. Ironically, the mask didn't prevent him from breathing in metal dust. We have two friends who are bus drivers. They have seen children chewing and sucking on their masks. One of them has seen a girl who is unable to wash or change her mask. That mask is moldy. This certainly isn't sanitary, and it's also unnecessary. I have lost count of the number of studies showing that masks do not prevent the spread of disease. Furthermore, the CDC has said that you can't mask your pets because, well, masks cause oxygen deprivation. So you can't mask your pony or dog or cat or ferret, but you can mask up your 3-year-old, who's a lot smaller than a Newfoundland dog or a Fjord pony. I also wanted to bring up that some kids are bullied because they do or don't wear masks, and some kids who report to the school nurse adverse effects due to masks are sent home because those are also symptoms of COVID. Other kids are literally struggling to breathe, and adults around them aren't responsible enough to just let them get a breath of air. This is just crazy. So I hope I don't hear anyone here say, masks are safe and effective. They're not. Thank you.
My name is Crystal Nicholas from Green. On May 5th, 2020, a representative from the CDC told Reuters News, quote, "The CO2 will slowly build up in the mask over time." What? Will? It will build up? Does not the omniscient CDC inform us that wearing a mask does not raise CO2 levels in the air you breathe whilst masked? But I digress. We continue with the quote, "However, the level of CO2 likely to build up in the mask, likely mind you, is most likely, here's likely again, is most likely tolerable." Tolerable. Hey, kid, can you just tolerate some loss of brain function for the CDC? But this unbelievable quote continues. "You might get a headache, but most likely, no guarantee of safety here, would not suffer the symptoms observed by much higher levels of CO2. But that's not all. The mask can become uncomfortable for a variety of reasons, and the person will become motivated to remove the mask. Yes, that is if you can recognize that you're nauseated and blacking out quickly enough and remove what's suffocating you. But there's more. While breathing in excessive amounts of CO2 for large amounts of time can be dangerous, can be, not definitely, it is unlikely that the general public would suffer from these complications by wearing a mask. Most people would wear face coverings on short stints outside the home. Yes, you know those short 8-hour stints your child takes to school. No big deal. Well, it's a big deal for my children as well as for others' children. My daughter only comes to school to test but experienced dizziness as well as an inability to concentrate. My son blacked out in the metal shop as well as in his science class. On August 19th, I informed the superintendent, board, principal, and nurse. No one, not one of them, ever answered me back or expressed one morsel of concern. But how could they? To express concern would be to acknowledge injury. And hey, we all know how unlikely that is. Thank you.
I'm the first one signing in, by the way. Sign in.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to start by going back to earlier in the meeting. Typically what happens is we're given answers based upon the results at at this point, I've asked 3 times to find out what other proposals were given, if there were any other proposals given. And I've also asked about the longevity of hydroxyls in the air, because this company that has sold you the air system has not proven that it's been studied in a lab. And I want to give you a little bit of my background. I've been studying viruses and bacteria for 15 years. And anything that you were claiming takes care of a virus or a bacteria needs to be clinically proven in an FDA-compliant lab with strict protocols. Canada has some of the most strict regulations, and the air systems that are in their hospitals taking care of things way worse than what we're talking about here. It's been clinically proven, and that's what needs to happen. If we don't have something that's clinically proven to take care of COVID, which has been stated in multiple letters that have gone out to all these families, then those letters are written illegally, giving us information saying that it's taken care of. And if a company is selling it to you, and I know that you guys aren't responsible for making the decision, but you approve the decision, then whoever made the decision to go with this company needs to have that evidence. So with that being said, there are certain questions that should have been asked prior to the installation. And the reason that I'm bringing this up and I'm staying on this subject is because you guys have the right to take that system back out that they told you will take care of COVID, get your money back, and put a system in that will do it. We're talking about $250,000 here. So $250,000, if there was more than one proposal, probably could have gotten your school buses, all your transportation vehicles, and everything else with something installed in it, and done it right, and proven that it works. So where is the testing that's being done? Is this company coming in and giving you results of the testing that they're doing? Probably not. There's questions that need to be asked, one of which, does the system, pop-ups, inactivate pathogens in the air and on the surfaces? Because if it's not taking care of it on the surface, then I can step on this carpet right here and I can send it airborne, okay? So, does the technology work 24/7? I did hear in one of the past meetings that it does not. They're telling you to turn it off at night. That's a problem. And the reason it's a problem is you're not disinfecting the surface all the time, then you are creating a breeding ground for other things to grow. Or the product that you're using is creating some type of byproduct that is not healthy to be storing in nooks and crannies inside of your school. And I told you what some of those contaminants were in a prior meeting. Has the technology been proven to be effective in real-world settings, as well as in a laboratory against specific live pathogens of concern, including COVID-19, or the virus that causes COVID-19? Will the manufacturer create a custom design solution for your place? Did he just come in and say, yeah, we're going to install this, 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 and this? Or did he take the schematics of your school and how everything works, and then show you how the hydroxyls will pass through whatever your air system is with the amount of time that it takes for the hydroxyl to work in order to kill said virus? Typically, it's 3 minutes. Just so you know, that's really quick. So, does technology inactivate pathogens on your occupied spaces rather than relying on a filter? I know the answer to that one. You're not relying on a filter. You're relying on bipolar ionization. Will the manufacturer test the efficacy of the technology in your space and guarantee a minimum reduction of live pathogens in your air? Those are questions that should have been asked to this person. And the reason I'm staying on this is I watch this stuff nationally. I told you I've been doing this for 15 years. The amount of lawsuits that are getting filed against these companies that are selling these products is insane right now. The people that are losing their jobs for making these decisions without other proposals
We're at
is
5
insane.
minutes now.
So
So we're at 5 minutes now, though.
Yeah, I hear you.
We are going to
So
I am
we're gonna
gonna
come
stick to
around,
the
we're
five-
gonna come around to
I
that.
am gonna stick
I'm
to
gonna
the 5
continue
minutes.
coming
I
until we
am
get some
going
questions
to
answered. This is
insist
our
that we
tax
stick to the
dollars we're
5
doing
minutes.
this. And
Sir,
also,
I am going to
I'm
ask
gonna be here
you
for
to
CRT,
finish up
or whatever else you wanna
because
call it
we're
down
at
the
5
road.
minutes.
Be quiet so we can finish.
Get your pens out.
So we're 5 minutes now, and I'm going to ask
CRT.
everybody,
I'll be here for that too.
excellent, thank you. And as we've done in previous meetings, let's save the applause till the end, and then we can have a big round of applause. I am going to ask folks to adhere to the 5 minutes, and as we've done at previous meetings, when questions are asked, we'll do our best to answer them at a follow-up meeting, and I think we'll find that several of those questions that were asked just now have been answered at previous board meetings, so we'll circle back around and do that again. So our next speaker, and please don't forget to introduce yourself either.
My name is Elizabeth Davis, and I'm here to speak against the masking policy. My child has asthma, never had to use, on a daily basis, I have to max him out on everything possible before I walk him in through that door with his mask on that he says he can't breathe in. As soon as he gets out of school, I'm a bus driver, not in this district, but I'm on the phone making sure that his inhaler's in the car. Did you give him his inhaler? Because as soon as the times that I have been able to pick him up, as soon as he comes out of school, he's coughing, he's wheezing, I have to give him his, anything possible to try to help my son to breathe. From going to nothing. I just want my son to breathe. Why does it have to be just one way? Why can't we have a middle ground? Why can't we allow face shields so my son can breathe and get an education? He didn't go last year because I didn't want him to have a mask, and he wasn't getting the proper education, so I put him in full-time, and he is physically paying for it. My son cannot breathe. I am begging you. I have to deal with this. I am petrified on a daily basis. Also would like to add, I'm a bus driver. Children, if you would like to pass around these masks, they are filthy, dirt filthy, that come on my bus from wealthy to poverty. They are filthy. Not all of them, most of them are filthy, gross, old saliva, dirt, food. Your kid at school on the ground drops it, oh, here you go, Timmy. Like, they're breathing in this on a daily basis. I see this, I'm a bus driver. The kids don't want these. They cannot breathe, this is disgusting. I sent my son to school with a mask, mesh mask with pinholes in it. The school decided to change that mask without informing me to a too small mask that he was literally like duct tape on his face. I want my son to breathe. I would love you to follow me for a day and follow my son and watch him struggle to breathe and jack him on everything that I have in the medicine cabinet. Please, there has to be a happy medium to this. Let us have the option to have a face shield. Keep the social distancing. There's got to be something.
I'm afraid to say my name for retaliation for my children, because there is some bullying going on. I'm
Please
just going to
do.
start off by Massar.
Ma'am, if you would at least write your name down so we can
Sure, I'll do that, Susan.
make sure we're taking account.
Got one. Thank you. I just want to start by saying masks are a tool of suppression and control to kill the light of one's spirit. Sorry, I'm not good at speaking publicly. Government and agencies, whether state or federal, just like everyone else, are not always right, nor do they do what's in the best interest of the people. It is our job to stand together and say, wait a minute, does this benefit our children? Is this really in the best interest of their welfare and well-being? Well, I'm here to question that, and as I can see, other parents are as well. I'm also concerned as to why it appears none of you, the teachers or the school administrators, appear to be concerned as we are, or why you are not being vocal or standing up with those who are questioning this as well. The mask mandates, social distancing, pushing LGBT lifestyle, CRT, which is now camouflaged as social and emotional learning, is all a concern to the welfare and well-being of our children and needs to be discussed in great detail and evaluated by all of us together. Schools following political agendas and policies that walk the line of emotional abuse and neglect over what should be in the best interest of the children should raise great concern. I'm starting to be really concerned about the things that I'm hearing and seeing going on at our schools, and this is my formal complaint. I am utterly bothered that the schools are more concerned about the many questionnaires regarding our kids' sexuality, sexual activities, and so on, than the concerns to find out where our kids are at academically and mentally with the effects of all this COVID. I am also concerned that I am hearing that teachers in this district are talking with our kids about matters that have no place in our schools. Kids are facing already enough challenges with life and challenges of this pandemic, and for teachers to be discussing racially charged political agendas that are reverse psychology, racism, and segregation is appalling. Making any child feel inferior or inferior to another due to race, sexual preference, or singling out any group over another is racist and teaches division and inequality. This all truly needs to cease immediately, for the focus needs to be on getting these kids back to where they need to be with academic stability is what needs to occur for their futures. I am very well educated in this area and would be glad to help educate you on these subjects, for I was the Director of Diversity for an agency with the Department of Defense for many years, and so you all also don't assume I am a mixed-race lesbian who was raised by my Nigerian parents and have first-hand experience with segregation and racism. I have been through it. I say that CRT, AKA, I also have a lot of experience in the legal arena fighting for equality, diversity, human rights, and racism. So when I say CRT, AKA social and emotional learning, is reverse psychology, racism, and segregation, I am confident in my knowledge and will challenge the curriculum in our schools where this does not belong. Push and celebrate individualism and not labels or stereotypes. I would like to know when enough is enough, so please enlighten us and tell us why you chose to sit up there in those seats. Why? Was it because your love for children and their carefree, adventurous compassion to learn and discover all the amazing neat things there are to learn in life? Was it because you knew you could push the limits to provide better education for the next generation than what you had? Was it because you too once were a child with so many hopes and dreams in life and wanted to ensure other children maybe got those chances you did or weren't able to get the chances you were able to get? Was it because you didn't have someone in your corner fighting for you, believing in you, and standing up for you with what is right, just, and fair when you needed it? Let me ask you this. Can you truly and honestly stand there and say with 100% certainty that you're putting the health and welfare of every child in this district first and foremost, before your own fears, before your own political agendas, before the misguided, contradicted, hypocritical politicians and agencies? So unmask our children, stop treading on the line of emotional abuse and neglect, stop pushing LGBTQ lifestyles, stop indoctrinating our children into politically charged propaganda, and let's stand up and unite and do what's morally and respectfully right in the best interests of our children. I won't go into detail, but I'll be glad to meet with anybody one-on-one and discuss the exact situations that occurred in our classrooms that do not belong and that do create racism. Thank you.
My name is Marsha Martin. I live in district with 2 kids at Lead Central School and another who will attend LCS next year. I have been a teacher in our district for the past 15 years. I am standing before you tonight to ask you to please reconsider MSAD 52 quarantine policies. I know that over the course of the pandemic, you've had to make several difficult decisions, and I thank you all for your service. These decisions have come from guidance outlined by the Maine CDC and the Maine Department of Education recommendations outlined in the Standard Operating Procedures document, or SOP. And I do have additional copies if anyone does want them. I'm standing before you tonight as both a parent and an educator to say that quarantine policies that do not allow children who are well to come to school hurt kids. I have seen this firsthand as a teacher and lived this stress as an employed parent. Maine DOE, in conjunction with Maine CDC, has put forth what appears to be 2 plans to alleviate unnecessary quarantine. The first plan is located under the quarantine exemptions on page 7 of the SOP. There it states that if schools have mandatory masking policies, the exposure was under mask conditions, and the exposure was student to student. When exposed, the student does not need to quarantine from school-based activities. I am asking if this is a recommendation set forth by the CDC and DOE to please have our schools follow this recommendation. The second plan set forth by the Maine CDC and DOE relates to pooled testing. I know that the pooled testing program has come to fruition with a lot of work on behalf of the school nurses and administrators. I know there are several families that like the scientific reassurance that pooled testing provides. There are also a lot of families who are not in favor of the school organizing medical diagnostic testing on their children. As an educator, while I am a little squeamish around the prospect of supervising and getting samples where they need to go, I know that this is reassuring families. I am also grateful to our school nurses who are overseeing the program at this time. However, as a parent who feels that medical diagnostic testing of bodily fluids is not something that my children should be doing in a school setting, I have very real ethical concerns with the equity in this program. I do understand that pooled testing is about seeing the bigger picture. However, my concern relates to what happens after a close contact situation. For example, there are 3 students who sit near each other in the classroom. Student A has COVID, student B is involved in pooled testing, and student C is not. Student A quarantines following CDC guidelines. Student B is not a worry because in pooled testing, they will be tested within the week. As stated in the SOP on page 3, pooled testing participants do not need to be tested if identified as close contacts through school exposures, since they will test on a weekly basis. Student C, however, will be sent home and not allowed in-person instruction even if they test negative, as also stated in the SOP on page 3, which says, unvaccinated and non-pooling close contacts must remain in quarantine for 10 days irrespective of the test result. My question and concern for you is this. How can 2 students who are sitting next to each other, next to the same positive case, and taking identical COVID tests have unequal access to their in-person education? I feel it's my responsibility as a teacher and a member of this community to stand up and say that's not right. I think this is unethical because following a close contact situation, my child has access to the same testing at their doctor's office or area pharmacy. The only difference is that me as a parent would be facilitating the testing and not school personnel. What this feels like, and I am speaking as a parent, is that the state of Maine is trying to force me into pooled testing so that my child can continue to come to school. This is unethical, and in my opinion, denying students equal in-person access to their education. I am asking you to please not allow the state of Maine to take away a child's right to an in-person education and a parent's right to oversee medical and diagnostic testing. In our schools, we have had little to no transmission in our classrooms. Please amend this policy to allow parents to test their child following a close contact situation, and allow a test performed in a doctor's office or a pharmacy to have the same weight as a test performed at school. Please choose to allow healthy students who are deemed close contacts in a school setting access to in-person learning. Thank you.
All right, so my name is Amanda Spear and I'm a resident of Turner. And I do want to say thank you for all the teachers and educators who come in and do everything that they do each and every day. But I'm very disappointed, although Mrs. Martin just came up here and spoke, but I wish more people would voice their opinions as educators because they see everything going on behind the closed doors. I am currently dealing with 2 children who cannot attend school, who are perfectly healthy, and cannot return until November 5th because they were considered a close contact on the school bus. I am very concerned with my children losing out on their education. My 5-year-old was in tears when I told her she couldn't go to school, and I had to explain to her why. They are losing out on an education that our taxes pay for, and it's not fair. If the masks and social distancing work, why do the people who are within 3 feet of them have to quarantine? I just want to know, why are our children suffering? If we're following the mask rules the way we should be, why are our children having to spend 10 days out of school and losing out on their education? That's what I want to know.
Alrighty, my name's Jenny Byron. I'll start off with some facts, and then I'll get into what my kids have been going through with this whole mask thing. Studies have shown penetration rate in cloth masks are 97%. You are selling our kids' health for 5% or less of safety. Instead of learning reading, writing, and arithmetics, they are learning fear of something invisible to the eye that has a 0.001% of any harm. You think you are teaching them to protect others, all while diminishing their own health. There is 100 years of research out there if you just look for it. The health officials have flip-flopped so many times recently that they were called in for a witness in court they were deemed uncredible under law. So why is this district getting credence to them, especially after it's just come out, the light with the dogs and the monkeys? They've been tortured, if anybody hasn't been following that. The picture it brings to mind is the invisible cage that us humans are in while they experiment and cause pain and suffering. Now, I have 2 kids. One of them goes to Turner Elementary School, the other one to Leeds. My oldest, he comes home complaining about headaches, tired, all throughout the week. All he wants to do is sleep, because all he's been doing is wearing that face mask. Completely different child on the weekends. Okay, so I shouldn't have that problem with my kid coming home tired. My 9-year-old that goes to Leeds, well, I hate to tell you, but he's a little bit smarter than the average bear. He's found a way around it by drinking himself to death. And he's figured out as long as he has that bottle to his mouth and is drinking water, he's not wearing the face mask. What good does that do? And then the fact that they're saying, there's no flu, well, I hate to tell you, but I had the flu very recently, and they're not testing for it. But guess what? They tested me 3 times for COVID. Each time came back negative. Oh, I had a sinus infection after that. Guess what? Still in their eyes, COVID, okay? And this whole pool testing, with them being able to go to school or with their shots, that's not right. If we're following this across the board, it should not be somebody, oh, you were around somebody so you can go just because you're in the pool testing. That's not right to force us parents into that corner. And I hate to call you out, Jill. I really do. I hope you don't mind, but
We're definitely not gonna,
okay, well,
the individual board members.
my apologies. Somebody's up here touching their nose, touching other things, not wearing their mask now, okay? That's exactly what's happening. We're self-contaminating our mask and putting them on our face. It's not doing us any good. We're doing ourselves more harm than good. And if she really did have COVID right now, and anytime she touches that mic, everybody else is going to get the same germs. So the mask does absolutely no good, because anytime you see somebody cough or sneeze, what do? They take down their mask or sneeze or rub their nose. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Addie, and I am a student at Green Central School. When I go to school, I can't breathe. sometimes masks make me tired. It also makes me sad that I can't see my friends' smiles. Also, I get very sweaty when I come in from recess. I really wish you could make masks optional. Thank you.
One child in the struggling.
My name's Joshua Lappin. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. I just want to start off with some numbers. I know we've kind of gone over some numbers already, but so in the state of Maine as of today, there was 103,041 cases in the state of Maine that were reported. So there's probably thousands that have gone unreported. So far, as of today, there was 1,160 deaths in the state of Maine. So with those numbers, not counting the ones that haven't been reported, it's a 1.13% chance of dying from this virus. In Androscoggin County, we've had, as of today, 10,837 cases with 99 deaths. So if you do the math there, that's a 0.91% chance of dying from this virus in this county, and we're masking our kids with muzzles. So another thing I want to touch on is I recently reached out to the superintendent to see if she had any studies that they're using to base these mask mandates off of. She referred me to the CDC website for these studies, which I appreciate. Thanks for getting back to me. So I went on their website and actually pulled up one of their studies. And this is the source control to block exhaled viruses. And it's talking about multi-layer cloth mask. I know a female who came up earlier kind of touched on the wording, so I'm also going to touch on the wording. So one thing they say, it says, but they can block exhalation. Can, not do. If it was proven, they would say do, does. Another point, it says, multi-layer cloth mask can block up to 50 to 70% of these fine droplets. Can, key word there. You guys are educators, you guys should understand what these words mean. I hope so. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. And then also, I've got a contract written up. It's not legally binding, but I hope someone will sign it and stand behind it. So it says mask mandate policy contract school year 2021 to 2022. And it says, I blank accept all responsibility for any adverse reactions, injuries, and or long-term effects caused by the mask mandate at MSAD schools for my kid's name. This contract only pertains to the mask being worn during school hours. By signing this contract, you are willfully accepting all responsibility for any mental and physical issues that is caused by the mask mandate you guys voted for in the MSAD school system. So publicly, I would like to show you this and see if you'd be willing to sign it. If you stand behind the mask mandate,
Let's stop with the clapping, please. You're welcome to do it at the end. Let's show respect to the speakers and the other folks in attendance by hanging on to it until the end.
I'll add 10 seconds, thanks. But if you truly believe in this mask mandate that you're forcing us to send our cool kids to school with, you would willfully sign that, believing in this mask mandate. I hate to put you on the spot. You're in a really tough spot. I understand it. You're probably going through 1,000 emotions, and you're stuck in a rock and a hard place. You're going to try to please us, please them. I get it. I truly get it. But we need a compromise. I suggest we do a new vote, send papers out to every parent, keep it anonymous, because I know some people don't want to know, they're not for the mask mandate, or they are. Let's take a new vote and see where people are at today, because all the information that has come out about this pandemic is getting blown out of proportion. And I know female just touched on it, Fauci doing experiments on dogs. Freedom of Information Act, his emails were released, him telling his coworkers, you do not need to wear a mask. But that's not talked about. You can do the research, search for Fauci emails, Freedom of Information Act, and you can find them and read them. This is the guy that we're listening to who tortures beagles. If you want to look up the video, it's terrifying. It will make you cry. And this is the guy we're taking advice from. Okay? So please, hopefully, get together, do another vote, send out a ballot, let people vote on it, let the people decide. Because your fears shouldn't be pushed on us. We should be able to decide as a community, because it's not a dictatorship. Thank you. Have a great night.
Hi, my name is Dawn Parker from Leeds. I have 3 children, 2 in this district and 1 in another district. And I just want to remind you, this is on your MSAD website, that the purpose is to provide educational programs that recognize unique learning needs of each student, fosters all students in appreciation for excellence and a sense of personal and social responsibility, health, well-being, and respect for others in the environment. We know every child learns differently, right? Equality, we want to make sure that we meet everybody where they are. Not all kids react the same to the masks, and you guys need to understand that, and you need to reevaluate this. There needs to be some leeway. I have 2 children, they don't care. If they'll wear the mask, they have no problems. I have another child that has chronic headaches and has missed a ton of school with no option for remote learning, mind you, which I'm not happy about. He's failing his classes. And, you know, this isn't fair. There needs to be an end to this. There needs to be a reevaluation. We need to be informed. Now that you have the whole board here, maybe having another vote would be a good idea, because last time I think you barely had a quorum. So that's my request, is to have this looked at again. Let's focus on education and not on the medical stuff, because these are not medical professionals that are taking care of our children while they're at school and on the school bus. The bus drivers writing up kids for having their mask below their nose. The bus driver is supposed to have their eyes on the road, not looking back at what the kids have on their face. That is not safe. Teachers need to be focusing on teaching their kids, not who's taking too long to sip their water because they have their mask up. It's not cool.
Okay, my name's Matt Landry. First board meeting I've been to here. My child is coming up on 7 years old, so I'm new to the parenting kid at school. And I guess, you know, the first year was good. Lately, you know, it's just been all shambles. I decided to pull my child out of school this year, and she loves school. Unfortunately, I'm not a fan of the masking or any medical intervention. And I think that is our option as parents. We should be able to decide. And like the email you guys sent out midsummer, I guess, saying we'll probably give you guys the option of, you know, masking. Of course, you did give us the option of the testing, which I don't know why there's an option there and not an option A and B. Yeah, I'm not going to put her through that until you guys make some better decisions, I think, and give us the option as tax-paying residents. And I just wanted to touch up real quick. I noticed someone speaking earlier that there was some in-school positive cases, and then I also heard that there was no in-school, there hasn't been in-school cases, so I'm a little confused there. Has there been in-school cases or hasn't there been? Because I believe you said that has not been in-school cases in one of your descriptions.
There's positive cases, but it's not transmissible.
Anyways, that confused me a little bit. Also, just, I don't know if I can ask if any of you have taken an oath to your position as a board member, or is there any way to get a raise of hand of anyone that has taken an oath to their
What do you mean? What do you mean as far as an oath? I mean, there's certainly a process that all board members go through, like we're sworn in with town officials. Yep.
Yeah,
With each of the town officials.
Members? Yeah, okay. So all members are sworn in by oath, okay? And that oath is to the Constitution, and we do have certain rights that our ancestors have died for, given their lives to secure those rights. And I think our children deserve to have those rights that these people have died for. And I guess I'll start attending more board meetings and any other meetings that until we can accomplish this. I can't sit idle anymore and watch this. So hopefully you make some right decisions here and give some parents some options and not force medical interventions on us. And I think that our children deserve it. Also, even staff members. I see that as even being wrong. And same thing with the hospitals. Hospitals and schools seem to be the two major human rights violators right now. It's pretty sad. Hospitals are running out of staff, and probably soon you guys will be running out of staff and children, because I don't think people are going to be following these CDC guidelines much longer, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm for another vote for sure. I really never even received anything asking my opinion whatsoever, which I think we deserve an opinion. That's basically it. Thank you.
Hello, Jimmy Childs from Leeds. I want to thank you all for everything you're doing. It's nice to see some of these educators touch on the point of assessment. So instead of speaking, I'll show. What I have here is I have a risk assessment. Okay, so we're doing a risk assessment for the COVID-19 versus the adverse effects, masking our children for 7+ hours a day. So what you have here, and all this information is from over 100 experts in all facets and institutions in these books right here. I will state my reputation personally, and I value that highly, on everything that I'm saying to be right and not hurt anybody's kids. So what we got here, so we're protecting the mass against C-19 sickness. So what we got is children are already very low risk to acquire or spread it. Children have ACE2 receptors that help prevent even getting it. There's proven medication like ivermectin, vitamin D, zinc, and other ones that you can take to prevent it for adults or children. There's been 0 deaths in Maine from the COVID-19. So it's less severe than the H1N1. That's a proven fact. You can look it up. The same survival rate as the flu the COVID has, which is a 99.99% survival rate. I have a 99.99% survival rate to make it home tonight if I don't get into an accident or struck by lightning. So we're all about the same thing. So here's the big problem that all these experts, and I will attest everything I have to what they said. Okay, there's an increase in carbon dioxide in the air, increase in carbon dioxide in the blood, increase in heart rate, increase in respiratory rate, increase in cardiopulmonary capacity, increase in breathing resistance, decrease in blood oxygen level. There's a feeling of exhaustion. All of our kids are feeling that, including my own. Dizziness, feeling of dampness and heat. I felt that meeting with Miss Brandt for 2 hours yesterday. I was hot inside. It was crazy. Okay? There's drowsiness. There's headaches. Kids have been getting headaches. Decrease in empathy and perception. There's chronic rhinitis. They can get dermatitis. They can get acne. They can get itching. Skin lesions, fatigue, impaired learning, and loss of facial cues because kids can't see the facial cues. Breathing wet, we inhale fungi. less happy, more anxiety, future inflammatory lung disease from breathing in the stuff inside the mask. There's changes in the pH level in the mouth because you're breathing in dry air. Our air needs to have a little bit of moisture in it, okay? Which leads to more cavities and gum disease. There's data saying that. Psychological damage, fear, we're teaching fear, and the lack of education because they're too busy teaching all this other stuff. Now you've got all this stuff right here, okay? Now this right here, all these point to your brain health, okay? It points to your heart health, your immune system health, your mental health, and your body health. Every one of these attributes in some way to hurt your overall being. So if you take all this and you figure, okay, now who would benefit if anybody gets sick from any of these? Follow the money. The money takes you right there to the big pharma companies who give half their money. They support the CDC, the FDA, the WHO, and they're trying to make more money because they're actually a vaccine company. The fact that they're saying you keep taking the mask off until you take the vaccine, that right there is a big problem here. Okay, so if this right here was a balanced scale and you're looking at it to be the lightest side for your kids' health, it would go just like this. So we're saving our kids right here by leaving them unmasked and causing more problems. If this right here is 100% effective, and you can mask our kids, and you guys are all guaranteed that 100% the kids ain't gonna get none of this stuff right here, then let's do it, but you know it ain't gonna happen. It's just the same rate as this, okay? So, and I'll leave you with this, okay? Judge John P. Flaherty in McFall versus Shin set legal precedent that an individual is not under compulsion to aid another person at their mental and physical health, okay, upholding the right to bodily autonomy. So what that means is you're asking my kid or any of our kids to have headaches and have these problems to stop somebody with a 0.001 if they're not even going to get affected. So like I said, the balanced scale tips like that, and I leave you, so anyone who's sworn oath has a duty to act on the main law. So there's all kinds of laws on criminal negligence, on abuse, there's all kinds of stuff that I found where people, so now you know all this information, and we send you out the emails, and all kinds of crosstabs, all kinds of studies you can look into, hopefully you all did. You know, this stuff keeps me up at night, because I'm worried about my kid, I'm worried about other kids. If you want your kid to wear a mask, send them to school with the mask if you think it's going to help them. But all this stuff right here is proven. All this stuff right here, I'll let anybody have it. I'll send you links. I'll do anything you want to show you this stuff. I put my whole reputation that this stuff is real. It's real. I wouldn't be here doing this if it wasn't. So you think the risk assessment and all this stuff pointing to all these problems we're going to have. You know what I mean? Can you 100% guarantee that my kid ain't going to have them problems?
We're at 5 minutes.
Jeff Markey, Turner. We've heard a lot about the whole masking thing tonight, as I'm sure everyone was expecting. It wasn't why I was here, but just take a second. I do hope sincerely that you all listen to the stuff that was said. It's not all just here yelling and screaming because we're a bunch of heated, crazy people that think you're out to harm our kids. It's that there has to be another side to this story. You know, you've got young kids here who I commend. You know, it's a really hard thing to do to get up here and talk to a room full of adults. But I hope it's given some consideration and not just crazy talk, because there are always two sides to every story. The truth is often somewhere in the middle, and all sides need to be accounted for and listened to. There really is, you know, two ways to look at this. COVID is very real. My daughter had it. I had it, recovered from it. You know, knock on, we were good. The other kids didn't. I agree. The whole testing requirements thing is a bunch of, you know, BS because they were tested negative by an actual doctor, but because it wasn't pool testing or because it wasn't the full quarantine, it wasn't good enough. At some point, I just want you guys to look at some of this stuff logically and sanely, like we're here in masks with the kids in school because we're inside, and they're within 3 feet, and they're gonna be gone 10 days. I'm willing to bet the majority of people in here have attended a football game at Levitt or a sporting event at Levitt, be it soccer or youth sports, where everyone is mask-free and the kids are all smiling. I know it says we're outside, but let's be real here. You're sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody breathing outside, you're gonna get just as much or more of your whatever out on them. No one has a problem with it. Put a mask on and go outside in the winter that are supposed to protect us and breathe, and just watch everything come through your mask. It's not really doing what they say, so there has to be some common sense in this. I understand there are guidelines, I understand the CDC mandates certain things or recommends certain things, but common sense has to at some point come into play as well. So just keep that into consideration. The real reason I came back was to, again, touch on the bullying. And I know Ms. Gillis had touched on and read that there's the policy, and that's great, that's fine and well, but policies are as good as the paper they're written on if they're not working. We've seen that you can send out survey after survey after survey related to COVID topics and things like that. I would ask that you send out a subcommittee survey of some kind to parents that asks for some feedback on how the district is doing regarding bullying in parents' eyes. Anonymous, however you'd like to do it, but I continue to see story after story after story and have parent after parent reach out online in an email about instances at schools. And, you know, every single one, it seems like the let's talk about our feelings and let's make sure we don't hurt anybody and then we'll just talk about this. So again, a policy is as good as its enforcement, and a policy is as good as how well it performs. And if it's not performing, it's great to have and it makes people feel good, but it doesn't accomplish anything. So I'd ask that you, amongst yourselves, if it's a subcommittee or however you guys do this, come up with some way to poll the district on how things are going as it relates to bullying. We know we can do it, right? We can survey, we can see what people think, and then see if that's really working. And then have a better way to communicate what these steps are. I can speak from personal experience. I went through hell and back trying to get answers, and I sat at schools and didn't leave until I got the chance to talk to somebody. It took multiple attempts to reach out to admins to get any response. You know, and thankfully, Ms. Martin, it's been going great for my son since we've had conversations and steps, but it took a lot of time for myself and her time to get to that point where we felt like something was happening that was tangible and was showing results. And it seems like a lot of people are going through that same thing. So I really would, you know, really ask you to survey the parents, see what people are thinking, see what their thoughts are, see what issues there are. There are probably many more kids like my son who just don't feel like it's worth bringing it up because nothing happens. So you're probably not getting all the information because there are other kids out there that just don't feel like the district is doing enough to help them, and that's a problem. You know, the tip of the iceberg, you get a little bit, but there's a lot under there that you're not finding out about. See what they think. That's all I would ask.
My name is Michelle Hathaway. I'm a resident of Turner and parent of a student in the district. First, I wanted to start with a couple of kudos and positive comments for staff within the district. My son has had some recent and sudden health concerns, and the high school staff have been incredibly responsive and have gone above and beyond to support him and our family. Including the school nurse during what is likely the most challenging time of her career, and I think that's really important to convey. In addition, I don't know how many school board members have the opportunity to have observed some of our high school coaches and athletic teams. And we know lots of kids in the community, and I coached a lot of kids when they were growing up in different youth sports, and have been able to see, I think, just about every fall team we have participate. And the coaches and athletes have just done an extraordinary job. Not only, I think, have most of the teams made it to playoffs for their respective sport, but I think the enthusiasm and the energy and the commitment to team and to being able to be together and to have the opportunity to play sports, which they were often missed out on last year has just been really phenomenal to see, and the joy and the just positivity that has been for those kids has been tremendous. So I think kudos to the coaches and to those kids who've worked really hard to get back to their respective activities. My sincere apologies tonight that your credentials, your integrity, your intentions, and your commitment to this community are being challenged continuously in the last several months. I've heard 5 or 6 times tonight about fairness, but your character assassination is grossly unfair. Thank you for continuing to navigate this pandemic in the best manner that you can, for leading this district through a return to 5 days of education and to finishing the first quarter of school. I believe in total right now our district currently has roughly 20 students who are out with COVID, and I know there are other adults with COVID in our community, including several recently released from hospitalization and currently suffering from long-term effects. If we prevented additional illness, additional hospitalizations, then I continue to applaud you even more for making these most challenging decisions. Despite some of what has been presented tonight, I do believe in and support the ever-evolving science and our need first as a society to protect our community from serious illness. Beyond the children in our schools, we're preventing children from sharing this virus, from bringing it home and further carrying this into our community. Prevention efforts are something that we can never fully measure for effectiveness. We'll never know how our current efforts have worked to prevent transmission in true numbers, how many cases have truly been avoided, and how many serious cases of illness or long-standing effects have been missed. Thank you for following the recommendations and for implementing what we know to be, at this date and time, to be our best chances of disease transmission. I respectfully request that we continue to mask for our students, at minimum, within our primary, elementary, and middle schools. At this time, these students have been ineligible for the vaccination. I would further support masking continues at the high school, but I understand that at this point in time, students and staff have made the decision to vaccinate or not, have had time to vaccinate, and are able to be vaccinated if they change their mind. If masking becomes optional, it would warrant a 4 or 5 week advance notice date, giving anyone who may be undecided at the time to have the time needed to be fully vaccinated and to receive those doses and with time to follow. Again, given the case numbers in our county and within state, and within the knowledge that we have several cases right now as we speak, it doesn't make sense to discontinue masking. As we move forward and begin to consider mask choice, I ask that we consider moving to this using resources that are becoming available. It is highly likely that children ages 5 to 11 will be eligible for vaccination as early as next week. Presuming it will take an additional 2 weeks for vaccine accessibility and appointments, 2 weeks between doses, and an additional vaccine and follow-up 2 weeks for the last one, I would request that we consider at minimum 6 weeks before masking is optional at the elementary and middle school level. This allows families to access the vaccination if they choose to, and allows staff to get appropriate boosters if they choose. I propose this for consideration assuming 2 things. Vaccinations are made eligible, as we believe they will be, and that numbers don't skyrocket further within our area or within our district. As you know, Lewiston and Auburn attempted to begin the school year without masking and have had to reverse course and return to masking. I understand that people feel passionately about mask choice. I'm just as passionate as moving forward in a manner that respects all rights and the needs to protect children and staff from illness.
We're at 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Liz Rothy. I'm a parent of a son at the middle school and a daughter at the elementary school. I also am a physician and have seen a number of cases of COVID, both in young and old patients, and fortunately have not seen pediatric deaths. However, I will say I've seen a number of complications and long COVID symptoms that have lasted for months and months in some teenage patients of mine, and so that's been difficult to watch. I am not particularly interested in data arguments at all, but I will say that I have read a number of very well-written papers that show good evidence that masks are safe and an excellent tool to help prevent transmission. They're not the only thing that helps prevent transmission, but they are an excellent tool. I've also heard the number that it's just 1%, like that's it, just 1%. I'm not entirely sure how many kids are in the district. I'm guessing maybe around 2,500, but I'm not entirely sure. But 1% of that is 25 kids. If you're talking about 0.1%, that's 2 to 3 kids, and that's frankly too many. And the other thing that people keep talking about is just lack of perfect evidence. Working in medicine and having read a number of papers about many, many, many different things, I will say that if you're looking for perfect proof, irrefutable proof on something that works all the time, every single time, you're going to be hard-pressed to find it in medicine in general. There's not a lot of good perfect evidence out there. Speaking as a mother, I will say I understand that this school is following state guidance. And with the fact that we have a mask mandate, it allows children who are exposed in school to continue to quarantine in school and wear a mask in school. I'm probably not the only person whose kid has had an in-school close contact but was able to continue in school because of the mask mandate. If that's taken away, my kids are going to be home by themselves during the day, and that is very alarming and upsetting, and certainly going to make underlying anxiety, fear about inability to keep grades up a lot worse. So I really want to thank you for the mask mandate. I also will say that rates overall in Maine have been going up quite a bit, and we don't know who we're protecting when we wear a mask. That's the thing about public health. It's not really sexy, and if it's working, you don't really know. So the numbers right now that Ms. Brandt cited are actually fairly decent, and likely because of in-school masking. So I would be interested to know how many school days have been saved because of the mask mandate. And so just looking at how many in-school exposures have occurred and how many kids have been able to quarantine in school would be interesting data to look at. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jamie Johnson, and I'm a resident of Turner, and I have 3 kids in the district. And I first wanted to just start out and say that my kindergartners will only refer to it as a pool party from now on. So that term has made the rounds in TPS, so it's officially a pool party now. And then I also just wanted to start off with kudos. I know that Ms. Gillis talked about this, and several parents have brought up the issue of bullying and behavior. And maybe I'm coming at this from a different standpoint, but my child recently had some behavior issues, and he got an in-school detention. I think they call it community time, which is pretty awesome. But it was handled so well, and I'm so glad that my child was dealt with the way that he was. He used his community time to talk to a social worker, to come up with a plan, to work through his emotions, to meet with the other people involved in this situation. They all worked it out. They're all friends. He got a hat today from one of them, and they're calling it a best friend hat. It was just great and lovely, and you know, it's hard to be the parent on this end of it sometimes when you have a child with behavioral issues, and it was dealt with beautifully, and I really just am forever grateful for that. So kudos to the way that it was handled, and I think it was handled the best way possible. Every party benefited from it. I didn't really prepare anything because I never want to get up and talk, but so public health experts have put forth several benchmarks for when it should be considered safe to no longer mandate masks in our school. And one is that the vast majority of students and staff within the school are vaccinated. Well, that's just not possible at this time because our 5 to 11-year-olds will not be fully vaccinated until late December at the earliest. Another benchmark is if daily case rates within the community fall below 4 new cases per 100,000 people. The current rate in our state is 34.1. They also recommend the testing positivity rate to be below 5%. Ours currently is 5.2% and rising within Androscoggin County. Simply put, we meet none of these benchmarks. But that's not to say that we won't at some point. So this doesn't have to be forever. I don't think anyone wants it to be forever. So, but now is just simply not the time to stop wearing masks. Let's meet one of those benchmarks. Let's get to that point where the children that want to be vaccinated can be vaccinated, to a point where our testing is going down, our case rate is, less than 4%. So we know what that would look like. We need to see, if we stop wearing masks, we would see increased cases amongst our student body and staff, which would lead to mass quarantines per
Folks,
DOE
please
policy.
do afford the speakers the courtesy of allowing them to speak without quite so much background noise, and I'm certain that they'll do the same for you.
And our kids would be missing school, and no one wants that. We want our kids in school 5 days a week. Our kids are in school 5 days a week. We're almost through the first quarter. It's great. And I think we can all agree on that. That's the goal. So, lastly, I just want to read something from the School Law Advisory Panel regarding the Maine Supreme Court's ruling on Maine school boards. And this is something that I learned that was new that I think is pertinent for tonight. The school board committee acts as a public board. It in no sense represents the town. It may exercise only the powers conferred on them by the state's educational laws. Its primary duty is to oversee public education in the manner prescribed by state law, and not solely to carry out the actual or perceived will of the local voters. And the reason I bring that up is because, we keep hearing that, let's bring this to a vote, there's more of us than them, we can argue about these statistics all night. But when it comes down to it, the school board's, your function is for state educational law, and that's it. And so we really need to look at what the Maine Department of Education, what the state law is, what the public health experts in Maine are saying. And that is how we need to look at this, because that's how the board functions. They're there to look out for what is best in an academic setting.
Hello, I'm Mariah Rink. I am a mother of 4. 2 of my kids are still at home, and one is at TPS and one is at TES. I'm here to show my support for the current masking mandates in our district. Masks are an important component in the layered approach to mitigate the spread of COVID in schools and reduce the need for extensive quarantines. The mask mandate reduces the need for keeping kids home and out of school. It reduces the probability parents will have to take off from work for 10 days to stay home with their exposed children, and it reduces the burden on teachers having to create remote work for their students or helping students catch up who have missed that time in class. I know that in-class time is so important and my kids get so much out of it. I wish COVID was more like the flu, where when an individual got it, they're most contagious when they start showing symptoms, so that keeping a kid home when they're sick just prevents it. But unfortunately with COVID, you're most contagious the 2 days before you show symptoms. So simply not sending a sick kid doesn't really work because they've already exposed kids. I also wish we didn't have students in our community who are at greater risk for complications if they have COVID. I think that we think of just our own kids, but there are definitely kids who, if they got COVID, it could be detrimental, and they deserve the right to come to school and feel safe. And everyone wearing masks helps that.
Me too.
Your student is much
So-
safer when they have a mask on, and they're protecting other students as well. Well, I know
Folks,
their parents.
if you have comments you'd like to share, please do so at the mic, just as the other folks are taking the time to do.
Thank you. Well, I know their parents are speaking against masks. They want what's best for their kids. I don't argue with that. I think more weight needs to be put into the recommendations from public health professionals who have the resources and experience to research beyond Google searching. Masking in school has been backed by an overwhelming number of organizations dedicated to health and education, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, National Education Association, and the National Association of School Nurses. That's just to name a few. There's a lot more out there saying that masks in school are important. This is not a decision that should be made based on a round of applause. This isn't a pep rally, this is a public health issue, and the deciding factor should be what is safest for our children and teachers. That option is going to allow for the greatest opportunity for our children to have the most in-person learning time. Is what is best for our students and teachers. Currently, the best option is continuing to have the masks in school. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amanda Peralta. I have 2 kids in the school system. My daughter goes to TES and my son goes to TRIP. So I got up here and I spoke when this kind of first came to issue back in August before school started. At the time, I mentioned that, you know, one of the concerns is that as the numbers go up, we're not going to have the beds that we need. So if you get in a car accident, there's not going to be a bed available for you in the ICU. And at the time, we were talking about what was really happening in Texas and St. Louis. What's changed is that's what's happening now in Maine. I work in a hospital. Back in August, we might have had 1 case of COVID in the hospital. Right now, it's like 30% of our caseload. We are watching people not be able to get transferred to the hospitals where they need to get care. A week and a half ago, if you had a kiddo or a cardiac issue, CMMC would have sent you somewhere else. They would have stabilized you and sent you elsewhere. You couldn't have been admitted because the beds simply weren't there. But if you only think that 1% matters, then that doesn't matter to you. I've been to a bunch of these meetings now, and I guess the piece that I really wanted to talk about is that this isn't working. We're arguing with each other while we look at you. And it's really ineffective. And I hear some stories from folks who are on the anti-masking side, and they break my heart. A little boy with asthma, I'm so sorry. I hope you have someone that you can talk to and really bring it up with. I mean, there are other arguments that just frustrate me. But overall, this just doesn't work. I'm sure you guys have business to get to that isn't us talking at you for the full night. So I guess my question to the board is, can we find a better way? Can we do something so that parents who have concerns can make a phone call and have someone they talk to, and they say, I hear your concern. We are restricted in this ways by state law, so bringing it to the school board won't help. If you have an issue with this, you need to bring it to the Department of Education. You need to bring it to the Department of Health. Or someone to talk to when you have real concerns about the health experiences that your kiddos are having. Because talking to the board about it, I don't think it's going anywhere. And for those of us who are pro-masking, we can get up here and we can thank you guys, but other than that, there's not a ton to say. You're doing what we're asking you to. Thank you. I'm sorry that there are attacks. That doesn't seem right. And I guess that's my question is just, what can we do to facilitate a conversation rather than you guys listening to 2 groups arguing at you when they're really talking to one another? That's it. Thanks.
My name is Anthony Shostak, a citizen of Green. When I last spoke to this group, the comments that dominated the discussion boiled down to a few things. Those in favor of mask mandates expressing their fears about COVID and telling everyone to trust the experts, and those who would prefer the schools to leave the decision to mask up to parents presenting data and descriptions of harm. I myself cited data and opinions from esteemed medical doctors and researchers, including the most published MD in his field in history, Peter McCullough, and the director of the NIH, Francis Collins, the latter I quoted admitting that there was no clear evidence of the benefits of masking. Having had my previous comments, reason-based and data-based arguments spurned in favor of cleaving to confirmation bias and cowing to fear, I hope, more than believe, that my comments and those of my peers today will have any effect and yet I must try again. First, let us examine the trustworthiness of your experts, the CDC and their ilk. These people are responsible for keeping effective medicines out of the hands of both patients and doctors at the cost of far too many lives, one in my own extended family. These are the people who have perjured themselves in testimony before Congress and obfuscated their own role in the origins of the COVID-19 virus. These are the same people who employed an unorthodox and opaque process to approve a drug that until recently would not have even been considered a vaccine, and that is undeniably the most dangerous vaccine ever put into general use. These are the same people who approve of threatening nurses, doctors, and others in healthcare with their livelihoods for not participating in a medical experiment against their will, resulting in the decreased services to the general public. Those are unassailable facts. Far from bolstering confidence in the trustworthiness of your experts, they instead erode their credibility. You cannot claim to stand for health and safety when your own policies create shortages of critical services that you've heard from people on the other side of the aisle, and promote the use of therapies that are proven to be more likely to cause harm than the disease they are intended to treat, as is the case with children 5 to 11, indeed, all the way up to 29. Again, those are facts. You can look those up. Next, let us consider what another expert has to say. Not one of yours, one of mine. Dr. Harvey Risch is an MD and PhD professor of epidemiology at Yale School of Public Health. In a recent interview, he was asked, what about masks on kids? I quote his answer, well, the CDC has published 2 papers that I saw today that are cherry-picked evidence of what we call ecologic studies, studies of communities, not of individuals. They're not randomized studies. And they're touting their 2 studies, and there's another 40 studies in the literature dealing with the efficacy of masks showing that masks don't work. So they're cherry-picking the ones that they think show that masks work and ignoring the rest of the literature that show that masks don't work, end quote. So there you have it from somebody who hasn't perjured himself. Masks don't work. He's an epidemiologist. He teaches at Yale. To get viewpoints like that, you have to go beyond what Shah and Fauci and Walensky issue as proclamations for the meme stream media to repeat uncritically like the useful idiots they are. You have to look a little deeper. Parents have done that, and they have given you the information that contradicts the directives of Fauci and his partners in deception and obfuscation. What does one do who is responsible with such information? If they act prudently, they compare evidence and do a risk-to-benefit analysis. You weigh 40 studies showing masks don't work against 2 that do. Well, that seems pretty clear to me. Then you look at the risks involved. Those include chronic low blood oxygen, increased incidence of upper respiratory disease, fainting, dermatological problems, depression, anxiety, poor communication, just to name a few. And the benefits? A mere belief that masks might help, in spite of evidence to the contrary. The scale shifts further against masks.
We're at 5 minutes now. Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak?
Sounds like he's got higher education than the teachers.
2 seconds, don't start it. I got my own too. Okay, let me sign in. Oh wait, you went to the next page. Sorry. Sorry, I did like it too. Okay, awesome. Okay, so my name is Catherine from Green, 3 kids in the district. I know, honey. You hear my voice. Can I just ask a quick question, regroup on the cases currently this week in all of the schools? Do you have that number handy by chance? Anyone?
I
She
believe
said it, but
that
I was like,
yep, and I believe that the superintendent's going to go back over those numbers when we get to that agenda item, so that'll be right after this.
okay, cool beans. So just anyone, I mean, I'm not saying this to insult anyone's intelligence, I'm just saying this is how you find the percent in case you didn't know how we're pulling these percents out of it. So you take the number of cases, let's say in this case it's 20 for the week, divided by how many students there are in the district. I called, spoke to Martha, there's 1,924 students enrolled in the district. You get that number, you times it by 100, that's your percent. Just in case anyone wants to do the math themselves so you can see. So I did have a chance and opportunity to sit down with Ms. Brandt last week and try and discuss this for 2 hours, a little bit round and round, just like this, you know, unfortunately, and I get that, because there's people that feel passionate on both sides. And I get that that's hard to weigh, especially with your own opinions on the matter, and if you have kids in school, you know, your own opinion on the mask. Maybe you wear a mask every single day at your job. Maybe you don't. If you don't, then maybe you shouldn't be talking about it. Just, or, you know, try it. Wear a mask, the same amount that the kids have to every single day in school. And if you get more mask break than the children, like if you're alone in your office, like I'm sure some educators are, and I'm sure Ms. Brandt is, because her mask was down, when I did enter the room, she didn't put it on until she was about 3 to 4 feet away from us, because her first inclination was to come over and talk to the sweet boy, and if he was awake all the way, you guys would want to too. And we need that. We need that connection. I asked my daughter and my other boys, again, how they're feeling. How are you guys? Because I don't have to do this. I don't have to research. I don't have to get up here. I don't have to come to these. I don't have to keep doing this and run the Facebook group. I don't have to do this if you're like, okay, no worries. But we all know that the mask isn't supposed to be forever. Oh, never started my timer, so it's up to you. So we all know that this is going to be forever. So like we were talking about, we need to be thinking about solutions. So what are some alternatives that we can start to talk about? Let's have a discussion. You've got a room full of parents that are concerned. Week after meeting, bi-weekly, whatever, we're here, we're trying. So that should count for something, and we should hopefully be part of the discussion. Let's talk about some other alternatives. I posted just on my Facebook group today, what other suggestions could you put up there? My first suggestion was, what if we just did a temperature check on students? I mean, that obviously would be a clear sign if there's a problem, then that child shouldn't be coming to school if they have a fever. So that could be one option that maybe parents could say, okay, yeah, I could see that, yeah, sure. And not just the parents, we're talking about like the school. I mean, not to add anything more onto the nurses' plates, they should need a raise if they haven't already gotten one. But just something, some kind of option. Someone tagged on it a little bit earlier about if there's zero transmission, which Ms. Brandt did say that there was zero transmission between, meaning that's not transpiring in between the classes. So far what I've heard for most, especially at Tripp, was football. So it's sports related. So, I mean, I know you don't want to take football and all the sports off the table even though they're winding down, because then you really have a packed auditorium if we took away football from Turner. But I digress. So unless you have a super big stake in the claim. So if we're not transmitting inside the schools, then maybe you could offer up okay, yeah, you're right, so far we've noticed it hasn't been transmitting in school, so close contacts will no longer have to quarantine. You know, if there's symptoms, please let us know, and then try it for a week or two, see what it's doing. Yes, you're right, we're all in the same experiment, and what we haven't tried yet going back to school is either A, unmasking, haven't tried that, and or doing anything else. We've only been doing this set of guidelines. So you have parents that are frustrated, and we're asking, please, let's talk it out. I tried to sit down, I'll continue to sit down, I'll continue to send emails. She's gonna be my new BFF by the end of the year. I'm sure she's gonna love my emails. I'll bring her flowers soon to say my appreciation for me reaching out, but we're not gonna stop because we are. I posted recently a quote, which I hope it resonates with some people. If, a child said, a mom said that their child was allergic to milk, and another parent said, oh, well, my child isn't, you wouldn't make the child that is drink the milk, because they're allergic. So just because your child isn't having an adverse effect inside
We're
school.
at 5 minutes.
Oh, I knew it. If I was looking at myself, I could have. And also, just to let you know, Auburn's biggest case count was 20, and that's when they actually implemented the mask again. And even that's still 1%.
My name is Christine Duplessis. I have 2 students at Levitt Area High School. I talked last time. I'm sure you guys are familiar with me, especially you. I just wanted to make a few points. My son was one of the ones that had to quarantine because of a close contact. This student's mother had COVID, and the student was vaccinated, so she still got to come to school this whole time. Didn't matter if she was carrier or not. But because my son's not vaccinated and we didn't want to participate in medical testing, he had to quarantine 10 days at home. I hate to tell you guys this, but he had 2 negative tests and we didn't quarantine. Okay, I know other students who have done the same thing. They're going to play dates, sports that aren't through the school. You know, there's all-star cheering, there's a bunch of other things that you guys don't take into consideration when you do these things. I want to also note that both my high schoolers' sleep schedules are completely messed up. They are coming home from school, we get home about 2:30, they're taking a snack and they're going to sleep till dinner. I have to wake them up 5, 6 o'clock and then they're up till God knows how long. I caught one of my kids doing homework at 4 a.m. So if that tells you anything. I also want to know, are the school nurses filling out any incident reports or medication reports whenever a student comes into the office with a health concern? I don't know if that's clear, because I felt like if they were doing incident reports, our numbers would be a little more correct as far as people reporting adverse masking issues. And I also want to point out that I am having issues with my son. Pardon me, anybody in here that takes offense to this, but being called a nigger. My son is half black. The kids are playing music that word is allowed in the classrooms. I do have a meeting next week with the principal to discuss some of these things, but this isn't the first instance of this happening. That's why I wanted to make a point of it now. I don't support masking. I don't support forced vaccinations. That's my line in the sand. If you guys order vaccines for our kids to come back in January, you're going to see how many people don't go along with this, because we're not doing it. Thank you.
Forced vaccinations, you could sue
Anybody
board members
else
civilly
wish to speak
we'll sue
at the
on many
microphone?
levels. They have no idea what's coming.
So there's no one else. All right. Thank you, folks, for taking the opportunity to address the board this evening. We will move on to old business. And item 7.1, Superintendent Brandt is going to discuss health and safety measures.
Okay, thanks, Betsy. So our goal is to keep students in school as much as possible. And that is why we have the health and safety measures in place, trying to keep kids in school as much as possible. To date, all positives have been deemed by the CDC to be from outside of school exposure. No in-school transmission, which is good, which tells me that those measures are working. They're helping us not have that in-school transmission at this time. So we are responsible for the health and safety of all 1,900 plus students. I have had some parents tell me that they don't mask at home.
Jim, I don't think that.
Okay, how far back do we go?
Is that better?
Can you hear me now?
Still not great.
Yeah, hers is loud.
That's just me.
All right, so how about now?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, all right. So I've had some parents tell me that they don't mask at home, and that, of course, is a family choice. The difference that I see is that we have over 1,900 students all congregating together in our schools 5 days each week. And we know that when people congregate, the risk for virus transmission increases. So at this point,
Folks, I am going to insist that you either, if you want to stay with us, let the speaker speak and take that opportunity.
So you heard people refer to the Department of Education's standard operating procedures, which schools follow. We must follow. And you've heard people here talk about the CDC's recommended health and safety measures as well. So vaccinated students do not need to quarantine unless they have symptoms, which means that when they are identified as a close contact, they don't have to miss school and they don't have to miss school activities. Unvaccinated students do need to quarantine. They end up missing school and school activities. We know that the quarantining is disruptive. It's disruptive to student learning. It's disruptive to families who have to figure out childcare. It's disruptive to our teachers who are trying to balance having some of their students in their class and some of them at home for different periods of time, getting them assignments, following up on those, and then catching those students back up when they come back. So the quarantining is extremely disruptive to everybody. There are limited options to keep unvaccinated students in school. One option is that if a school has universal masking, as MSAD 52 currently does, then close contacts in a classroom setting that are 3 feet or closer rather than 6 feet or closer have to quarantine. This means fewer students need to quarantine every time we have a positive case in a classroom. And I want to give some specific examples of that. You heard Principal Mates talk about that a little earlier at Tripp Middle School and what that meant. At the high school, we've had total all this year so far, which is 2 months, 23 positive cases of COVID. Over 100 students did not have to quarantine that would have had to quarantine if we didn't have the universal masking, and it was a 6-foot close contact identification. At Turner Elementary School, 16 positives in the last 2 months. It would have been at least 25 students who would have had to quarantine who didn't have to because it was 3 feet, not 6 feet in the classroom. At Tripp Middle School, Principal Mates had said 158 students, 56% of the population. At Turner Primary School, 12 positives, approximately 96 students who would have had to quarantine did not have to quarantine. At Green, 12 positives, 25 students who did not end up having to quarantine because, again, of the 3 feet, not the 6 feet. At Leeds, 5 positives and 12 students who did not need to quarantine. That's a total of 84 positive cases in 2 months that we've been in school, and 358 students who did not have to quarantine because of having universal masking and having a 3-foot rule, not the 6-foot rule. So the universal masking allows close contacts to be 3 feet, which has kept 358 students from needing to quarantine in just 2 months. So it does make a positive difference. The second option to help keep unvaccinated students in school when they are identified as a close contact from a school exposure is the pool testing. Students who participate in pool testing do not need to quarantine when they're identified as a close contact as long as they don't have symptoms and as long as it was a school exposure. The pool testing has been a tremendous amount of work. It has been added to everything else that nurses and principals have been doing already this year. Add that to all the close contact tracing, all the phone calls, all the focus on the learning, accelerating the learning for students. It's a lot. But people are doing it because it is an option to help keep kids in school more often. So the CDC continues to recommend the masking indoors at schools, the distancing when feasible, the hand washing and sanitizing, the ongoing cleaning, and the daily health check before attending school. My recommendation in August was that we align and follow the CDC recommendations. I do not have a different recommendation tonight.
Thank you. Board members have questions for Superintendent Brandt? Jessica.
Can I just follow up on something a parent asked? Are there any medical exemptions for children who cannot wear masks, such as like the face shield?
So the nurses will work, and principals sometimes too, will work with families who have an issue with the masking, asthma or any condition like that, to talk about the possibility of a face shield.
Other questions for Superintendent Brandt? And just from a process standpoint, as a reminder for board members, the policy as it stands today, the practice is to mandate masks within the district. If board members wished for something else to happen, we would need to take some sort of action this evening. If there's no action taken, the practice would stand as it is today.
I have one more question about the school.
Jessica?
So just, do we have any wiggle room as a district with the pool testing? I just heard what Mrs. Martin was saying about, you know, if you have a child that is participating in the testing and one is not, and then that kind of delineates what happens, so that the child who participates will stay and who doesn't, if it is tested outside the district, it doesn't count. Is that coming from the state level?
That is coming from the state.
Any other questions for Superintendent Grant? If not, and if there's no desire for other action from board members, we'll move on to 7.2. That'll be a discussion of after-school activities and winter sports.
Can I ask a question?
You may.
So what happens if we go against the state? What are the repercussions that would come from the state if we do not follow their guidelines?
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. There would need to be some compelling reason not to go with the state recommendations for starters, and then there's not
what are the repercussions
right.
if you guys said no? Do we lose any federal money if we do not follow these guidelines? I've asked that question through emails, contact the finance department. I've gotten the runaround. Does anyone have that answer?
So state and federal funding are two very different things for
Okay.
starters.
So is there funding tied to the guidelines if we do not follow it? It's a simple yes or no answer.
There is not a specific dollar figure tied to X, Y, and Z for practices. We are expected to follow the Department of Education's guidance. I mean, that's why they exist
Yeah.
within the state.
So there's not a specific dollar amount, but there is a dollar amount tied to.
That's not what I said. I said there's not a specific dollar amount.
I just feel like it should be a yes or no answer, and instead it's the dance around. That's okay. I guess I have one last question. Are you willing to sign that contract?
No, we're not. You're not. You get to ask through me. That's.
Okay. Can I ask one more question? No?
Well, you just asked it. I mean, and that's. I would never expect our superintendent to sign something on the fly. I mean, we do get legal advice on things, so that's clearly something that one would want to explore. Yes, ma'am.
So do you have a choice in the matter? Like there is a say or no? Like you can't actually choose? Or are you saying that you, because I know you went for a vote, so it implies that you have a choice. But it's almost like they're telling us you don't have a choice. But we obviously know that you do, because there are schools across the United States. It's not like the United States is all following one set of rules. So there are school districts that have chosen to not, and I'm not even just talking about Maine.
To not what?
To not choose to follow the guidelines. To make exceptions or to do their own, the lighting system, cases, try something. I mean, so there are. I could see if it's straight across the board, all of the United States, every single school is all doing the same thing. So then it's a choice.
So the board took a vote in August,
Uh-huh.
and the board, as I indicated, the board this evening had a couple options. Could either continue on with the practice or take some action to do something else. So we'll move on to item 7.2. And yes, ma'am.
This is my first meeting. I just had a question about the teacher that didn't speak. My stepson is in quarantine because he's not opted into food testing. I think everyone probably could agree on both sides. A negative test from the doctor's office versus
versus a pool testing would be the same. Would there be an option to not follow that, just that one guideline, I guess? Because it is a little baffling. He doesn't want to do the pool testing. We don't want him to do the pool testing. I'd like to take him to the doctor's office to have that done. Is there a way to just not follow one thing? Is that an option at all? Does anyone know? Because it really is not, that is one thing that, I am a nurse, and it does not make sense to me. I'm sure it doesn't make sense to anyone on either side, realistically. That's why I'm here. And I just want, that's what
Yep, definitely understand the frustration.
Yeah. Are you able to just not, is there as a way to not follow that one thing that clearly makes no sense to anyone on either side?
I'm sure where there's a will, there's a way, but that's not something that has been discussed at this point. No. I think you've had ample opportunities to speak this evening. If there are other questions, certainly from anyone who hasn't spoken yet this evening, we'd be happy to hear those.
Are we going to keep addressing this? Like, should we just keep coming back to what you're saying? I mean, we're just asking if we can just start having an actual, I mean, you have us all here, so have it maybe instead of going through all of our speeches with all of our facts back and forth, we sit here, the adults who are actually concerned with the matter,
So I
because we're
think,
here.
as the superintendent
and talk about
indicated
it.
earlier on in the process, even back in August and forever ago when life began not being normal, that as the pandemic conditions change, and we had one speaker that talked about different benchmarks, and I'm sure there's lots of different benchmarks that lots of different entities could propose,
Can we use the benchmark
that
just for the school?
as we, and I'm going to ask you the same question I asked other folks this evening. Please give whoever's speaking the courtesy of allowing them to speak uninterrupted. As conditions change, whether it's cases or whether it's vaccination rates or anything else, the superintendent will continue to update folks at these meetings. And as conditions change, we certainly would be remiss if we did not continue to consider our options. Thank you again. We'll move on to item 7.2 now. Discussion of after-school activities and winter sports.
Can we cancel those because obviously COVID's so dangerous?
Nope, we're going to discuss them though, because that is agenda item 7.2. I'll turn that over to, who's going to lead this one? Kim? Oh, sorry. You've been sitting so quietly that I apologize.
Good evening, Ryan LaRoche, Athletic Director here at the high school. I'll start with where we've been. We are in the process of wrapping up the fall sports season. We played a very normal fall schedule against the normal teams for the most part. We are now in the process of fairly normal playoffs. Our field hockey team, as announced by Mr. Shaw earlier, won their game today and going on to the Western Maine semifinals. Football team is qualified for playoffs. They have a bye this week and will play next week. Golf team finished their season as KVAC champions and state runners-up. Our cross-country team has 4 representatives running in the state meet this weekend. And we had 2 soccer teams play in first-round playoff games earlier in the week. We did have to quarantine some athletes due to close contacts, 9 in one sport, 11 in another. We did postpone 3 events that were played later on in the season. We also had 2 events that we canceled as there was no way to make those up once we weren't able to play them. Where are we headed? Winter sports. As we continue to prepare for the winter sports season, most of the winter sports we play inside, so students will be properly masked at all times, except for students in the pool competing, and students who are participating in outside activities like alpine skiing and Nordic skiing. All spectators at our events will be asked to be properly masked in our buildings. We will continue to allow spectators both home and away unless there's some sort of CDC conference or MPA change. There may be other schools who will not allow spectators from other schools. That's still on the board, on the table in some of the different districts. And there may be some who just may not allow any spectators at this point. We will not have concessions at our home events, as you have to remove your mask in order to eat or drink, so there'll be no concession stands offered. Some facilities, including several of the colleges in the state, will mandate that all athletes who enter their facilities either be vaccinated or have a negative test within 24 or 48 hours. This means athletes will be able to be on teams but cannot participate in these facilities without vaccinations or negative tests. Our winter schedules are finishing up this week, and next week I've seen all but 2 now. They are very normal schedules. They did restrict some travel due to the bus restrictions that we're facing with drivers around the state, but otherwise we're looking at a fairly normal schedule. And as of now, there is nothing coming from the CDC, the MPA, or the DOE, or the Maine Department of Health and Human Services, so we will continue to follow the guidance from the CDC that we've been following to this point. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. LaRoche?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I would direct to have, would the if kids are in the pool testing that supersedes the doctors we've learned, would that qualify athletes as their negative test if they're playing winter sport?
Not for the colleges, no. They've made that very clear to us. It'll have to be a 24 or 48-hour test, not necessarily the pool testing.
Would the over-the-counter ones that you can get, the added live cells, count, or does it have to be a doctor's? Because some facilities allow for the at-home test, some are doctor's only.
The one that I've seen, only one so far, was Bowdoin, and it's not the over-the-counter testing.
So you got to schedule to go like the primary or
Correct.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 2 questions. First off, so did you say that if they were enrolled in pool testing, they didn't have to mask while they were playing?
No, you're going to have to mask no matter what.
Okay.
It's going into the college facilities, where those facilities that are privately functioned will require students to be vaccinated or have a 28 or 48-hour test,
Okay.
not over-the-counter test.
So the pool...
And when I mentioned the pool, I meant the swimming pool for students who are swimming, don't have to wear a mask.
Okay, I'm sorry. We were calling it a pool party earlier. Let's...
Nope, good question.
Really confusing. Okay, so wait, the colleges, you said there's one that they want an act. So even if the students, let's say, were enrolled in pool testing here at any of the schools, additionally, they would have to go outside?
If they're not vaccinated.
If they're not vaccinated. Okay, so the colleges prefer and trust that this be done at a doctor's office?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Not high schools, though. Pool testing by nurses. So the colleges...
Are there any other questions that pertain to this actual discussion?
That did. It was a fair question.
It did. That is correct.
Of course it did.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. LaRoche? If not, thank you very much for the update, and we'll look forward to continued successful work in those areas. Nothing else for other on old business. That brings us to the consent agenda. We have a motion. Carlos. Second from Richard. All those in favor? Unanimous? Brings us to new business. And item 9.1, instructional nomination, Tripp Middle School health teacher. Kim.
Yes. So Principal writes that Jen Carr has been with the district for a long time, and she's a very valued employee, and that is all very true. She has been looking to move to the middle school level, and the middle school believes she will be a great fit there. This is pending her certification, which should be coming any day.
Do we have a motion for this? Carlos and Richard, even though they're on different ends of the table. All those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to 9.2, second reading and adoption of revised policy BCA, MSAD, I'm assuming there's supposed to be a 52 in there, school board member ethics. Carlos and Richard, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.3, second reading and adoption of revised policy BEC, executive session and regulations BECR, executive session procedure. Carlos and Richard, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.4, second reading and adoption of revised policy EGAD, copyright compliance and deletion of regulations EGADR.
Second.
Carlos and Richard, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.5, first reading and acceptance for deletion of revised policy EEAEFA, security cameras on school property, and regulation EEAEFAR, video surveillance on school property, administrative procedure.
Second.
Carlos and Richard, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.6, first reading and acceptance of policy ECAF, video surveillance on school property.
Second.
Carlos and Richard. Discussion?
So was one
Jessica?
replacing the other?
Yes.
Other discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.7, first reading and acceptance of revised policy GCFB, recruiting and hiring of MSAD 52 administrative staff and regulations GCFBR, MSAD 52 administrative hiring procedure.
Second.
Carlos, the second from Richard. Discussion on this one. Yuri.
Just to expand the first sentence so that it covers more people.
Who wants to answer that?
I couldn't hear the question, sorry.
So I think the question was, does that simply expand the number of people in that first paragraph? Is that the intent?
It really is just following the recommendation of wording changes and legal reference from Maine School Management Association.
Thank you. Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.8, first reading and acceptance of revised policy KDB, public's right to know / freedom of access.
Second.
Carlos and Richard. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.9, approval of revised job description for transportation supervisor. We have a motion from Carlos. We have a second. From Yuri, just to mix things up. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to 9.10. 9.10 is approval of revised job description for transportation specialist. And that was Carlos. Do we have a second? From Jessica. Crystal. Well, I knew it was to my right, but thank you. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous?
No.
No? One opposed? Sorry. 9.11, approval of job description for facilities supervisor. And that was Carlos. We have a second. And that was Crystal this time. Thank you. Discussion on this one. So just to clarify, this one is a completely new position that we talked about last time, so this is not a revision, this is new. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed? That brings us to 9.12, approval of lease purchase with Androscoggin Bank for a 2022 84-passenger bus at $122,943 and a new 2021 Exmark Laser ZE Series zero-turn radius lawnmower for $9,599. We have a motion from Carlos. Do we have a second? From Yuri. Discussion on this one. Yuri.
This is just what we referred to earlier, that this is monies that were budgeted for these things. It's just because of the amount that needed to come through the board.
Thank you. Other discussion on this one? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Those opposed? I think it was unanimous. 9.13, approval of the 21-22 emergency school closing procedures.
Second.
Carlos with a second from Richard. Discussion on this? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor? Unanimous? One abstain. That brings us to 9.14, approval of the 21-22 comprehensive emergency plans. We have a motion from Carlos. Do we have a second?
Did we have a copy of that in our packet?
Do we have a second on this one? We have a second from Yuri, and the question was, do we have copies of these in our packet? Who wants to answer that?
I do not have one.
Right, so we don't have copies of these. I don't know. Teresa, these plans actually reside in...
Each school.
Correct.
has a superintendent's office.
Right,
And
and are available for review.
I believe, I'm looking to Kim, I just stood up because I couldn't see the vote, so I'm happy to try to answer, but.
Or Kim, Ken?
Yeah, no, I think it's probably Martha just didn't put them in. I think they were supposed to be in.
So we can either, we have a motion on the table to take action on this. If folks would prefer to see them again prior to this, we can certainly table that.
You need a motion to table?
If the gentleman who made the motion wishes to withdraw and the second wishes to withdraw, we can simply table this.
Yes, that's fine.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the motioner and the second both agree with that. So we'll 9.14, the comprehensive emergency plans, we'll take that up at our next. Kim?
I'm sorry, I thought I misunderstood what you were asking for. So we never include the emergency plans in there because of the information that they contain. I thought we were talking about the financials.
No. So this is not unusual that they are not in the packet. That's what I was looking for, and that's
correct.
why I asked if they resided in those locations.
They reside in those locations.
But board members may certainly review them.
They're welcome to come to my office.
Yes. So given that, would we like to rewind, perhaps? Or do board members wish to review them? Board members always have the opportunity to do that, and I think in years past, we've included that in the email directing folks that you certainly have the ability to review those. So next meeting then? Yes. Excellent. Yuri?
Have they changed since last year when we had the opportunity to review them?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Have the plans changed significantly?
The plans have been updated to represent new staff, but they have not changed significantly.
Thank you. So as a reminder, board members certainly may review those in the superintendent's office. And we'll revisit that one at our next meeting. 9.15 is to report the completion of probationary period for the following employee, Sherry Willis, district-wide bus driver, and that was October 12th, 2021. 9.16, is a request for authorization to sell old MLTI MacBooks back to teachers for $50 each.
Second.
We have a motion from Richard and a second from Carlos. Discussion on this. Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? It's unanimous, just double checking. So the other items we have on our agenda this evening are executive sessions. We have 3 of those. Oh no, we had a request earlier to move 9.13 before the executive session, correct? 2-3. So, 9.23 is approval of August and September operating and expenditure reports.
Second.
Motion from Richard and a second from Carlos. Discussion on this. Yuri touched on this when he reported out from finance. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right, back to 9.17, unless there are any other items of business the board needs to take up this evening. If not, I would entertain a motion for 9.17. That's an executive session to discuss compensation of officials, appointees, employees. Pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A, the other 2 executive sessions for folks following along at home are a request for an executive session to discuss the Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D, and a request for an executive session to discuss the AFSCME Council 93 Local 2010 AFL-CIO negotiations pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D. I have a motion from Carlos for 9.17. Do we have a second? Second from Yuri. All those in favor? Unanimous. We will proceed into executive session. Thank you folks for